Hi, I'm Voltam, founder of the Linux Distro community. The Linux Distro community is a place for people to hang out and discuss Linux, Linux distros, software, and open source. The Linux Distro community is a community funded by its members for its members. We are a friendly, welcoming community that encourages people who use Linux operating systems and software to share their passion and knowledge with other people. We believe that when people share information freely, everyone benefits. We'd love to see you become a part of the Linux Distro community. You can voice chat with us on Mumble or text chat with us in IRC. Head over to linuxdistrocommunity.com for details. Join in today in the sharing of knowledge and the freedom that a Linux operating system gives people. Thank you.
Thank you, Voltam, for that introduction. Welcome to yet another fabulous Linux Zoo crew. And today on the Zoo, we are going to talk about why Linux is better. We're going to talk about things that Linux can do that you just cannot do in Windows or can't do in Windows very well. But before we start, Oscalit has an announcement he would like to make.
Hi everyone, I'd just like to inform that the lessons that I mentioned last week in the Zoo Crew shall be taking place on the 6th of June, which is Saturday next week, at 10 p.m. GMT +0. And I'd like to direct everyone to moodle.oscalitfoundation.co.cc, and I'd like you to sign up and create an account so I can acknowledge everyone that shall be taking part in the course, and I shall be emailing everyone with information on stuff they need to download and stuff they need to learn for the course, because there's a couple of things that you need to do before I can give you this course to do. It is a 12-week course, and I'm going to do certificates, and there's other things, and you'll learn all about it next week, basically.
All right, good stuff. And for those of you on the East Coast here in the United States, that will be at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, if I'm not mistaken. So, good idea. I'm going to be around for that myself. I definitely want to check that out, so it should be a good show. And thank you for your contribution to the community, Oscalit. Okay, all right. Before we start, I'd like to introduce my speakers tonight. We've got C. Smith, Oscalit, PINGCASTS, myself, Stats, and the Linux guy. Welcome one and all, and welcome everybody who's listening to us live right now in the listening room. If you have any comments, be sure to put them in on IRC. I'll see your comments. If you include my name on them, I'll be able to spot them, and I'll be happy to add your comments as the show progresses where appropriate. All right, well, interestingly enough, last week we talked about why we think Linux sucks, and we covered a few little topics there. Little things that bothered us, but obviously we really don't think Linux sucks, otherwise we wouldn't be using it. And there are a number of things that Linux can do that Windows really just doesn't do well. And one of them, one of my panel members suggested that we talk about ext4. And when we talk about ext4, we're talking about our file systems. They don't fragment. We don't have to defragment our hard drives every few weeks. Instead, the way the file system lays everything out is, you just don't get that much fragmentation, thereby slowing down the performance on your computer. How do you see that, C. Smith?
I see it as a great blessing, mainly because, as you have said, we would have to use a defragmenter, and that takes hours on average. So, yeah, defragmenting equals something that anyone wouldn't like.
Actually, my experiences with a defragmenter, I used to use a number of them when I was running Windows, and the thing is, it usually didn't take that long if you ran the defragmenter maybe once a week or so. How do you see it, Oscalit?
Defragging is a pain in the backside, so extension 4 and extension 2 and all those types of file formats where I don't have to do that is brilliant in my eyes. It saves me time and it's more productive. I don't have to spend time worrying about it, so that's a good thing, isn't it?
I definitely would say so. How do you see it, PINGCASTS?
Defragmenting your hard disk sucks, and it can, if you don't defragment your hard disk on Windows, you can wear out your hard disk because your computer has to work harder to get the fragmented files, and it's just slower, and it's great not having to deal with that on Linux.
Yeah, you gotta love it. Things just never slow down. How do you see that, Stats?
Yeah, thanks, Spatry. I think I was just learning how to do all that stuff on Windows, and was quite proud of myself, and I found when I turned to Linux that I didn't have to do all that sort of stuff, so I think it's an absolute bonus.
Linux guy.
Yeah, defragmenting, it really wears down your hard disk, and on my quad-core computer. I mean, it didn't really take that long when I was in Windows, but on my other computers, it was kind of slow and took about an hour, and it just wears down the hard disk too much, and it can eventually, just die out.
Now, another interesting thing about Linux is that we really don't consider viruses to be a threat. Last time I checked the wiki, it appeared that there were only 48 known viruses for Linux. And all of these, in order to work, requires root access. Whereas in Windows, I mean, come on, there are viruses all over the place. And I mean, it's so easy to get them. They can sneak in through Flash, through Java. There are other ways they can get into your system, bypassing your antivirus system and that sort of thing. So let's talk about that a little bit. How do you see viruses, C. Smith?
Viruses are like, for Linux, it's like the non-existent backdoor.
Oscalit.
Well, viruses, it depends what you define a virus as. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of malware out there for Linux and all that type of stuff, but viruses, I wouldn't say so, because I'm sorry, but it's a thing to my heart. Viruses are things that can replicate themselves on your hard drive. Most of the viruses these days are malware that keylog you, do a man-in-the-browser attack. So yeah, I don't see it as that big a threat on Linux at the moment, because first off, you do need root access, and plus with every kernel release, the virus has just become invalid.
Exactly. Every kernel release does depreciate those viruses and that sort of thing. And also, I mean, even if you were to download this malware and such, it really can't do anything unless you give it root privileges. How do you see it, PINGCASTS?
Well, there are some you can get on, or some malware you can get for Linux. It's just not as prolific as Windows, and the security on Linux is a lot better, so it's not as hard. Although, usually only, as a normal user, you can only modify your own files and temp. That's not always true if they manage to get an exploit into the system or do some sort of privilege escalation, but that's not as much of an issue on Linux as it is on Windows.
Stats.
Yeah, Spatry, I think it's another reason why Linux is better. It's if you've got a system that's having to deal with all that sort of virus, malware, whatever you want to call it, from my perspective, it's basically a operating system that's using up a lot of energy, and it's just drawing away from what could be a possibly a lot more productive system. So I think on that level, it's just something that's dragging the power away. That's how I see it.
Understood. Now, the Linux guy went on to say that was asking if there is any antivirus software for Linux. Yes, there are a number of them. Avast has a flavor for Linux now. You also have the Clam antivirus. And then, of course, I have a copy of Bitdefender for Unisys, and that one I actually downloaded for free and signed up for their code and everything. And you can install that and use it, and it's good for 1 year. Although that is proprietary software, and since I've installed Arch, I haven't really had need to use it. I just have the Clam antivirus, and that works quite well. C. Smith also wanted to add that a virus generally, at most, can create a useless program in your home folder on your system. And another thing, viruses can creep into Wine on your system as well. Now, I can't imagine them doing much harm to your Linux system, but yes, you can get your Wine partition infected. I think you were the one that mentioned that to me before, PINGCASTS.
Yeah, Wine is a translation layer for Windows, so if you attempt to run other Windows programs, a virus you could risk gaining compatibility with viruses. It can't touch your system, though, like it couldn't delete files or anything like that, but if it's something like a keylogger, it could potentially run on Wine.
And of course, the best thing you can do in that situation, obviously, though, is to keep a backup of your Wine directory. that you can use, and then if it does become infected or something like that, you can just delete that warning directory, and then you can, of course, restore your backups. So that's a way around that one. Okay, now, another thing that is really great about Linux that Windows just cannot do is the fact that you can update your entire system with one click. Windows, we all know how Windows Update works. It updates Windows. It may update one little driver here and there or one other little program, but most of your programs you're going to have installed on your system, obviously, are going to, have their own updaters built in, whereas Linux, you just click one button, or if you're an Arch, you just run pacman SYU, and it updates everything. How do you see that, C. Smith?
Yeah, that one-click update button really doesn't exist. It's more like 3 clicks. But it's a nice feature of Linux. You have all your updates in one place. How much more convenient can you get?
Oscalit?
Yeah, it's a great thing about Linux and other operating systems that work like that. So Macs work like that, and FreeBSD works like that, and it's pretty great. On Windows, of course, every program you have has to call home, as they call it, and that's just a pain in the backside. It uses up a lot of bandwidth and uses up God knows what else. Whereas with Linux, I can just, either if I'm using Ubuntu, I can just click on the button, it does it for me. If I'm using Arch or Gentoo or whatever, I can do updates through the terminal. Either way, it's a lot more simpler than having to go out on the internet and trying to find the latest source or the latest EXE, whatever you want to call it, and having to install it manually. It's a pain in the backside.
PINGCASTS?
Oh yeah, it's great having the update and click. And software repositories is great too. All of that's done through the repositories. That way you can download and install from the repositories. You don't have to go to some website you've never gone before and install some software that might screw up your system.
Stats.
Yeah, totally agree with PINGCASTS there, because if you're updating your whole system and everything sort of goes along with it, it's brilliant because, like you said, if you're on say Windows and you've got something you want to go and look at some software, you go onto different sites that can cause problems. I personally liked that whole idea when I first started using Linux, and I really like the fact that so you can set your mirrors to make it fast, all that sort of thing. It's just a lot better.
Yeah, now, High6 went on to say that Linux has no registry problems like Windows. Well, simply, Linux doesn't have a registry. But GTO on IRC mentioned that once you update, no reboot is needed. And I was actually going to bring this up. Somebody is on the same wavelength I am here, unless, of course, you update the kernel. So that's something that's really nice, too. So, for instance, let's say I run update, KDN Live gets updated, Firefox gets updated, all these programs get updated while I'm actually using them. When I close the program, all I have to do is reopen it, and it's the next version, no reboot required, with the exception of updating the kernel or one of your major peripheral drivers, such as a graphics card or a kernel update. I haven't had to reboot on an audio driver update. Has anybody experienced that?
I can't say I have.
I would say you'd have to reboot every time Xorg or drivers come out as well for said.
Couldn't you just restart Zorg?
Yes, but for beginner users, it's a lot easier just to tell them to reboot. Of course, if you want to, you can go in manually. You can tell Terminal, okay, I want you to reload all the modules. I want you to reload this, but it's just easier to reboot. Because in that case, I don't know, if I do an update, sometimes I don't read everything that's there because I cannot be bothered, personally. And if I see one thing as an Xorg, I'm like, okay, that's there. And I see a couple of other drivers, like, all the drivers are there. I'm going to need to reboot. If I wanted to, of course, I could list them all and I could take them all and I could reload them, but that's a pain in the backside.
You will have to reboot for kernel updates, but you can apply, or you can get what's called K-Splice, and that'll allow your security patches to be applied to your kernel without having to reboot.
All right, now, let's go ahead and talk about package management. Really, all I should have to say about this is that Windows does not do package management. Sure, you can always install an application with a single click, But what if you don't know which package you're looking for? Where's the repository to search? Where are the various means of installing applications? Where are the dependency checks? Where are the MD5 checks? What about not needing root access to install any application in Windows? Safety? Security? Sanity? How do you see it, C. Smith?
I agree completely. Package management, best thing that's close to the best thing that's come to Linux. You have one place you can get almost everything. There's very few software packages you can't get in a repository.
Oscalit.
Yep, package management's the greatest thing about Linux. Who couldn't agree with that? In Terminal, of course, some packages I won't be able to find them, but I like just being able to type, okay, I want to find a client that does this, and it's like, I type it in, it's like, oh, here you go, you can try this out, and then, even then, I don't have to go and find it. It's like, if you just type this command, it'll install it, and like, who could not be happy with that? It makes things so simple, and that's what you want in an operating system. You want simplicity.
PINGCASTS.
I will say it can be a blessing and a curse. I mean, it's great. I think it was either last Sucre or maybe the one before last, where we mentioned lack of standardization. That's so many different file formats, and that can be a problem. I mean, you can always package it yourself or do whatever, but that is hard for beginners, and that is what can make it difficult. But other than that, the package management thing is really great.
Stats.
Yeah, Spatry, I think it does make Linux better having the ability to go into a Synaptic Package Manager and see things in there and be able to install or reinstall. I use it a lot.
And the nice thing is, there are so many wonderful packages that you can get, and a lot of package managers that are out there for Linux will automatically check for the dependencies that are required so that a package can run. And for the most part, especially if you're using like Ubuntu or you're using Pacman in Arch, that one pretty much handles all your dependencies and that sort of thing. Really not so much for the Gentoo fans that are out there, because pretty much you have to, or is that Slackware, I think, that you have to manually find all those dependencies. If you're using an easier distribution out there, for the most part, most package managers will handle that for you. Oscalit.
Yeah, that's Slack where you have to resolve all the dependencies yourself. Gentoo just comes with all the dependencies, so you just type in a merge and then whatever you want to get, and it's done.
I will say, in Slackware's defense, it is pretty awesome.
It is pretty awesome. I'll admit that myself as well.
All right, let's move on. Now, here's another thing that Linux really excels over Windows, and that is servers. For anyone who thinks that Windows is gaining where the server market is concerned, I would ask you to wake up and join the 21st century, folks. Linux can and does serve up anything and everything, and does it easily as well. It's fast, secure, easy to configure, and very scalable. And let's say that you don't happen to be fond of SendMail. If that's the case, you have plenty of alternatives to choose from. Even with serving up web pages, there are plenty of alternatives to Apache, some of which are incredibly lightweight. Oscalit.
Windows Server? Don't make me laugh. I'll be hacking that in no time at all. No security. There's nothing there. It's old. Why are Windows even try? Come on. Linux is the way forward when it comes to servers, and everybody knows that. Security professionals, even a layman, knows that Linux is what everything runs on. They can tell you straight away. They're like, oh, Apache? Yeah, I know Apache. What's ISS? It's like, that's the Windows alternative. They're just like, nope, never heard of it. That's laymen know that. So, Windows on a server, I do not see it. Linux is the way forward. Not even the way forward. It's just the only way you can go for a server these days.
PINGCASTS.
Windows, the security is atrocious on Windows. I remember somebody telling me they were able to get admin privileges on the system whenever somebody opened a PDF as admin, and they had done that on their school's machine. That made me laugh. For servers, couldn't you, I know sometimes BSD might be appropriate for servers.
BSD is actually superior to Linux, but we'll not get into that.
Interestingly enough, as a former web developer and Flash designer and that sort of thing, I always chose a Linux server, even though I was running a Windows operating system at home at the time. I always chose a Linux server because because I could get my Flash to communicate with the PHP backend that came pre-installed with it, and I like the fact that I could keep my Flash applications reasonably secure so that people couldn't, download, and I also encrypted my Flash as well, but on top of that. But that way people couldn't open up my Flash elements and peek into the code and see what I was sending over to PHP and that sort of thing. So I like the security aspect of it. Oscalit?
Well, they never would have been able to get PHP anyway, because PHP is totally server-side. You cannot view that in any way or form.
That's always an added plus, so I mean, the security is there. And that brings us to our next topic, and we are going to talk about security in Linux. There was a scare in the IT world some time ago known as Phelan X2. And it actually hit Linux. But the real issue was that it hit Linux servers that hadn't been updated. It was poor administration that caused this little gem to get noticed. The patch, as usual in the Linux world, came nearly as soon as word got out. And that's the rub. Security issues plague Windows for a couple of reasons. The operating system comes complete with plenty of security holes, and Microsoft is slow to release patches for the holes. Of course, this is not to say that Linux is immune. It isn't, but it's less susceptible to attacks and faster to fix problems. C. Smith?
Yeah, the security aspect is the reason I use Antivirus, but never have found a virus on my computer. It's just that hard to get a virus on your computer.
Oscalit.
Security on desktop side is brilliant. On a server side, because most of the servers do use Linux these days, there is an awful lot of hackers and developers that do try and attack said packages that are Linux based, mostly being Apache. Apache's really, I haven't looked at Apache in years, but there is exploits coming out with every release of that thing, because that's what a standard is. That's why Windows has so many viruses, because it's treated as a hackers lookings is like, I can go for the really small person here and get nothing, or I can go for the really big person that has everything. What would you choose, the small person or the big person? I'd choose the big person at least.
PINGCASTS.
Yeah, security is on Windows is horrendous, and yeah, viruses, malware, people hacking into your system. It's not very hard. Somebody was telling me he was sitting in class and he'd mess with the teacher. He'd hack into the Windows machine, lock it, change the password while the guy's lecturing, play with the mouse, do all sorts of stuff to it while he's trying to teach.
Stats.
On security from my end's been pretty well. I just set up a firewall. And I use my computer for basic stuff. I use desktops. I don't have a lot of mobile devices, but for what I do use it for, I've found it turns on, it does what it's supposed to do. I can do all the searching on the web, and it does exactly what I want it to do, and that's why I use Linux, and that is why I think it's better.
All right, now let's go ahead and move on to the next generation of desktops. And of course, a lot of people have been spreading fear, uncertainty, and doubt, saying that Linux is hard. The Linux desktop is harder to use than a Windows desktop, and and those people are talking ancient history. The Linux desktop is just as easy, if not easier, to use, to even customize and configure than Windows can. And of course, you've been impressed by the 3D transparency and possibilities first introduced by Windows Vista, and maybe possibly decided that these unique capabilities were worth the extra money. Well, guess what? Linux has had these enhancements for years. Linux can do it better for free with much less demanding hardware requirements. There are so many different desktops that you can choose from. We're not going to have time to cover them, but the fact of the matter is there is a desktop for everyone out there, and it allows you to balance your workflow in a way that you feel comfortable. We'll start with you, C. Smith.
Yeah, what I can say about that is it's nice, but if your comp is, first thing you gotta do, back up profile, and be prepared to restore it if something goes amiss.
Oscalit, what's your favorite desktop?
I don't use desktop environments. I use Windows managers because I like things that are easy to customize, and I use OpenBox, and it's really nice. I can customize just about everything in it, and I like changing things about it every day of the week. I've never kept the same for that long. It's always changing.
Stats.
Yes, actually, I was using the open box. I really enjoy that. I like the old GNOME stuff too, but recently I've been using the one that they put together for the Linux distro community, the Unity interface. Now, I didn't think I would like it, but I actually have been using it for the past couple of weeks, I'd say, and I've had no problem with it, and I like it. I also really like XFCE, and I'm using the Ubuntu Studio at the moment, so I kind of like, I'm a bit like Ping, I kind of like to change around, but these ones I've been using, they're all good.
The only limit in the Linux world where your desktop is concerned is your imagination. Right now, I'm running OpenBox, which is a very lightweight window manager. However, there's also Compiz that I run as well, which is usually I use that in the coffee shop when I want to impress my friends, look at my wobbly windows, and look at all these flames and all these other cool things I can do with my desktop. That was one of the things that really attracted me to Linux, but the thing is there are other desktops as well. You have GNOME, you have KDE, you have the Unity interface, which is actually improving these days. If you don't want a taskbar, you can remove it completely. You can configure your desktop to where you can access your menus with a simple mouse gesture or right click. You know, the possibilities are endless, and this is something that I could just never do very well in Windows. So the possibilities and the options that are available to you are simply amazing in the Linux world. Okay, let's move on to our next topic, the total cost of ownership. All right, well, everybody knows that if you have a small office, it's going to cost you a license for each and every computer that you have in the office. Whereas, if you have a small office that is running Linux on those machines, you can take one copy of Linux and install it on all of the machines without ever having to worry about paying for licensing fees and that sort of thing. Also, another added plus to reduce your total cost of ownership is the number of people you have to maintain those machines. So if you have a large office that is serving up 1,000 computers, how many people do you have to manage those machines? Whereas if you have an office with 1,000 computers running Linux, you only have to have one person manage all those machines. And this is another feature because we have SSH capability, and that was brought up before the show as well, where an administrator can transparently log into a computer that somebody is actually using, make changes to the system, and do updates, that sort of things, while people are actually using the computers without even having to reboot them. So your cost of ownership is a lot lower.
If you're running a network of computers, Linux is really the way forward. It's if you have budget and you have to stick to that budget, just go with Linux because it's free. If you have a bigger budget and you can go and get Windows and Macs and all, do that because, I don't know, people are used to it. But I think total cost of ownership is obscene with proprietary software. In the last 2 months, I've updated both Adobe products and I've updated my Apple Macs in my Studios network. $20,000 just over that. And that is obscene.
PINGCASTS.
You can get Windows software to run that sort of stuff, like SSH, but you probably wouldn't want to. You can get Cygwin for all your Linux, Unix stuff, but you probably wouldn't want to. There is some pay-for Linux stuff, like Red Hat is very popular for server stuff, and you pay a subscription for that, but it's not as expensive as Windows, and if you're in school, you can get an academic discount for it.
Red Hat does not cost money. What costs money is the support they offer. You can go and download the ISO for Red Hat as it is. You just won't get support.
Oh, I didn't realize that. I thought you had to pay a subscription to download it, or it would come with that.
Nope, it's free.
Stats.
Yeah, I was going to say, what I've heard Red Hat is a business solution, but I've seen, I think one of the members here, OptiChip runs everything on Linux, and he regularly changes a lot of his stuff, and so I know that it does work because I've actually seen it, and it has to be good to run what it does. So yeah, I totally agree. I've seen it with my own eyes.
C. Smith.
Yeah, I'm gonna say I can't say anything from a sysadmin side, but I can say that if governments are changing it to Linux and saving millions of their total cost, why couldn't Pro school district do that for Pete's sake?
Well, I don't want to, talk about politics and corruption, but that could be a factor.
The long and short of it is cheaper to run Linux in an office environment or even a home environment than it would be to run Windows, and that is another plus. Well, we have covered a lot of things here on our show that regarding things that Linux does better than Windows. Now, Oscalit wanted to bring up something about Secure Shell. And start us off on that one.
Yep, this is one of the things that Windows or Mac just do not offer. SSH, Windows has the alternative called Telnet, but it's really unsecure. Everything you send in it goes in plain text. So if I am in the middle of your network, I can just see everything you send over to it. I can see all your passwords, all the commands. Whereas with SSH, it's all encrypted to me and it makes no sense to me. So I think for security matters, SSH is a really good factor about Linux, and it's one of the reasons I use server-side Linux is SSH. I would actually use Windows if I could. If it had Telnet, if it had SSH on Windows, I would actually use it. And that is because I can teach other people that, well, not I can teach, I don't have to teach other people how to use it because it's already there for them. And that's the reason I would use it, but I can't because it has Telnet and all the information just gets sent over, and I do not want that.
PINGCASTS.
I would mention Mac does actually have SSH. It is disabled by default, though you have to enable it, but SSH is great. I'll use that when I'm away from home, get into my desktop or VPS, and I can run applications, or I could run an SSH tunnel to another machine. Let's say I'm on a public network, and I don't want to have a man-in-the-middle attack on me, or if they did, they'd probably just get all the SSL junk, but they wouldn't be able to see like a plain text, or they couldn't try to get info off of me.
Good food for thought there. Now, I'm going to move on to something else here. C. Smith really loves this about Linux, and that is the sound architecture. Take it away, C. Smith.
I'm actually going to have to pass it over to Oscalit because I think he could explain it better.
I don't know about better, but I can definitely explain it. You have one main sound system in Linux. Prior to what everyone believes, you do not have multiple ones. You just have ALSA. ALSA is all, and you have op ends for it. So you have jack, you have pulse audio, you have OSS, or whatever that one's called. And basically, what I hear from people who transfer from Linux, not from Linux, transfer from Windows to Linux, say there is something about the sound. It's a little bit better. If you listen to Raven Geek, his wife is just been recently transferred over to Linux, and the big thing she said was the sound quality, because she listens to she watches lots of videos and stuff, and she says the sound is like so much better. I don't know what it is, but it is better. I can hear it myself as well. If you listen to it on a Windows and listen back on a Linux, if you have it configured properly, it is much, much better. I do not know why, but it just is.
PINGCASTS.
I've never actually compared sound quality. I really can't comment much on that, other than how Linux is, you could manipulate it a bit more, so if I were having issues, I'd probably have a bit more control over my environment than on Windows.
Stats.
Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, the sound quality, there's no... I don't see there's any difference if you're playing something or watching videos or listening to a radio station. It's all good. It does that sort of thing. If you want to delve into the world of Jack and you're prepared to sort of, work on all that really, that stuff that's involved in doing really good quality audio, low latency, all that sort of thing, it can be a little bit of a challenge, but it is is doable, and I'm still working on stuff now in Ardor, and I'm finding that it's interesting. Just a little bit lacking in some maybe effects or removal of noise. That you can use Audacity, but it's still pretty primitive noise removal, but it does work. It's really it's doable.
And interestingly enough, before the show started, I had an opportunity to sit down and do some tinkering around with my audio driver and that sort of thing. And that's just something that Linux does really well, is that you have better control over your audio hardware and that sort of thing. And, if I could make a comparison, I think that the Linux sound system does sound a lot better than the Windows system does. My ear, there's something funny with my ears there, but I mean, if I were to compare, unfortunately, I can't compare them side by side because I only have one computer, and I've already removed my Windows 7 partition because I'm done playing all my games. Now I'm playing in Blender all the time. But the thing is, I have noticed that there is better sound quality, and I like the precise control that you can have over your audio driver, and I was just playing around with that today. Interestingly enough, I was playing around in the GNOME ALSA mixer, and there was one little feature that it didn't have to actually enable the recording, that or I missed it, so I actually had to adjust that through the command line, and I was able to get that working because I purchased a new microphone today. But all in all, I really love what Linux has to offer. I think it is a competent replacement for Windows. There are some ways that Linux does need to grow, because obviously we did discuss on the last show, there are things about Linux that tend to aggravate us, but there are things about Linux that we truly, truly love. I'd like to take this time to thank C. Smith, Oscalit, PINGCASTS, and Stats for joining us. Also, the Linux guy appeared, but apparently he had to step out for other reasons. I'd like to thank him for appearing at the beginning of the show. I'd like to thank all of you listening in the listening room and participating on IRC. As always, it's great to receive your feedback as the show is going on. And, of course, I would like to thank everybody who is at home watching this on YouTube. I will have links to everyone on my panel's shows. Be sure to check them out. They are well worth your time. And we will see you next week, same time, same channel.
Today's show was brought to you by the Linux Distro Community. Visit us today at linuxdistrocommunity.com and chat with us on Mumble or in IRC on the Freenode network in the Linux Distro Community channel. The Linux Distro Community. Freedom through the sharing of knowledge.